I wanted to put out a quick, short and informative review about the Sig ROMEOZero Pro because I did not see a lot of reviews or good reviews on YouTube regarding this optic. So I'm going to try to keep this short, pros, cons, and my conclusion and recommendations for this optic. So the pros about the Sig ROMEOZero Pro. It is made out of lightweight polymer. This is my comparison spreadsheet between some of the optics that are available for the DeltaPoint Pro footprint. The ROMEOZero Pro, which this review is regarding, is at the top. I've listed battery type. You can see the top two, the ROMEOZero Pro and the ROMEO1 Pro, take the smaller 1632 cell, while all the other ones take the larger 2032 cell. The weight with battery is given, and then the weight with the shroud, and in the case of the Romeo 2, the full shroud with the rear window. What is highlighted in green, I believe, is the configuration that most people would run these optics. The ROMEOZero Pro, Romeo 1 Pro, Romeo 2 Pro, and the DeltaPoint Pro all have shrouds included with them, and I believe that's the configuration that people will run them in. The EOTech eFlex is the exception. It does not have a shroud, and that's just the weight with the battery. So you can see that the ROMEOZero Pro is the lightest, as it should be with a polymer housing. And without the shroud, it is very, very light at only 0.6 ounces. It includes a steel shroud for strength. It has a nice large lens. The dot is very bright at its highest brightness setting. The lens has minimal warping and distortion around the edges. It has multiple dot sizes and options. This is the 3 MOA variant. The dot quality and crispness seems pretty average to me. The dot does not flicker. The brightness is adjusted by varying power to the emitter rather than pulse width modulation of the LED emitter, meaning that when you're sweeping it or at lower brightness levels, you do not see that flicker or that refresh rate that some optics have. I think an example of this is the Hex Wasp. It's low cost. I paid $200 for this optic in a bundled package with the Sig Foxtrot 1X flashlight. This is a pretty nice little light for like a compact sized gun, and by itself is about $80. It uses the DeltaPoint Pro footprint and mounts directly to your Sig P320 slide, and it is a good cheaper alternative to the DeltaPoint Pro and Romeo 1 Pro, Romeo 2, EOTech eFlex, etc., etc. This optic has MOTAC, or shake awake, whatever you want to call it. So the optic will shut off after 3 minutes of inactivity and then turn back on really quickly when it senses any movement. Front sight is just visible through the lens of the optic and can be lined up coincident with the top of the rear sight notch. So I believe the integrated rear sight notch works good for a iron sight co-witness, meaning you don't have to have a secondary iron sight setup with this optic. You can just leave the factory height front sight on the slide of the pistol. The cons of this optic: there's no auto brightness. That is a feature I really like for range use. Of course, if you're using it in low light conditions with a weapon light, you usually have to manually adjust the brightness higher anyways, but sometimes I like to just be able to take it out of my range bag, turn it on, and have it adjust the brightness automatically for the daylight ambient conditions on that day. I have durability concerns with the polymer construction, even with this steel shroud, because it's kind of flimsy. You need the included Allen key to adjust elevation and windage. I don't like that. I'd rather be able to use brass that I find on the deck, or my pocket knife or something like that, or the screwdriver I keep in my range bag. There's also no clicks for elevation or windage, and there's no indication of adjustment per turn of these screws or per click, obviously, because there's no clicks. This is also not night vision compatible. There are no night vision brightness settings, which doesn't matter to me because I don't use night vision, but it may matter to some people. I am showing the difference in color of the tinting on these lenses. This is the Holosun 507C. This is the Sig ROMEOZero Pro, and this is a Trijicon RMR. The brightness button is in front of the emitter and so close to the back of the lens that your finger smudges the lens every time you go to press the button. This button turns the optic on, it also turns it off. It also adjusts the brightness level. Also, if you press and hold the button for 3 seconds, it goes into tap mode, and then you tap the outside of the optic to adjust the brightness level. It's like they knew that the button was in a really stupid spot to adjust the brightness level, so they had to program in this other bullshit so you could adjust the brightness level. The problem is that this doesn't even work well. A lot of times it won't register your taps, and also the button is so vague and mushy, it's really hard to even get it into the right mode without turning it off first. And the button has no tactile or audible feedback, and it's very vague. So this whole system is awful. It's even worse than the DeltaPoint Pro. The 1632 battery is mounted through the bottom of the optic, so you have to pull the optic off to change the battery, which is unfortunate. And also there's no rubber sealing O-ring around the electronics on the bottom of the optic like there is on a Trijicon RMR, for example. In conclusion, would I buy this optic if I hadn't already, and what would I use it for? For range use? Absolutely, I would use it for that. I think it's great for range use. I've enjoyed it so far. I would also possibly use it for home defense because it does have that MOTAC activation system. I could, turn it on, put it on my nightstand, and then when I picked it up, that dot would come back on if it had turned off. I would not use this for duty or concealed carry or combat use of any sort, and I can't really speak to whether I would use it for competition use because I don't compete. Maybe someone can draw a conclusion that they would or wouldn't use it for competition use based on this review. From my standpoint, this is a good optic for range use if you pay less than $200 for it, or find a sweet bundle deal like I did with this flashlight for $200. I will excuse its shortcomings and the stupid placement of the brightness and power button and their stupid tap system for changing the brightness because I didn't pay that much for it. If this was a $450 DeltaPoint Pro, the placement of that button would be absolutely inexcusable, and that's why I will not buy a DeltaPoint Pro. But for this price point and for what I use it for, range use, I think it is a good optic. I have been using this optic on this gun. It's been reliable. It seems robust enough. It's maintained zero. I would consider using this for home defense due to the MOTAC system once I get more rounds through it and it's proven its reliability to me. Right now I have it on the pistol without the shroud because they packaged the wrong shroud with it. This is the one for the version of this optic that bolts to an RMR footprint. Also, if you have an RMR footprint, do not buy this optic. That would be so stupid. There's so many better options out there. Anyway, so Sig has great customer service. They're sending me a new shroud. Once that gets here with the correct bolt pattern or hole placement in it, then I'll put it on the gun and I'll drill the correct holes in this one so I have an extra.